Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks. Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Continuing Education, Bachelor's Degree Program, Elective Course, Rural Development, BRDE-101 Rural Development, Indian Context, Block-1 Rural Society Unit 3 Rural Power Structure. 3.0 Aims and Objectives. This unit aims at depicting the nature of power structure in rural India. It will deal with the concept of rural power structure, the traditional power structure, various factors responsible for change in the traditional power structure, its democratization, and emergent power structure in contemporary rural India. After the study of this unit, you must be able to understand the concepts of power, power structure and rural power structure. Explain the traditional power structure in rural India. Identify the factors responsible for change in the traditional power structure. Describe democratization of the power structure in rural India, and comprehend the emergent power structure in contemporary rural India. 3.1 Introduction. In the previous unit you have analyzed the economic structure of rural society in India. While understanding the agrarian society formed on the basis of agriculture and allied occupations in rural India, you must be eager to point out the power structure that consists of caste panchayats, community councils or village panchayats. In this unit we will attempt to explain the concept of rural power structure and discuss its occurrence in contemporary India through the past, wherein democratization of rural society has played a special role in changing it. Let us start by clarifying the meaning of the term power. 3.2 Power. Power has many manifestations in different social situations. Based on their varied perceptions, political scientists, psychologists and sociologists have analyzed it in different ways. Plato and Aristotle deal with the concept of power in relation to their theory of state, whereas sociologists find the notion of power as an integral part of social structure. Max Weber regards power fundamental to social stratification, which has the three separate dimensions of class, status and party. According to him, class is the outcome of distribution of economic power, status is a kind of normatively defined social power, and party is a group active in the political sphere having concern for political power. Weber, then, defines power, in general terms, as the probability that one actor within a social relationship will be in a position to carry out his own will despite resistance, regardless of the basis on which this probability rests. In this sense, power is merely a factual relation that involves use of force or coercion which may or may not be carrying social approval. Since Weber's time, many sociologists have assumed that power involves subordinates' resistance which must be overcome by superordinates. Alvin Gouldner noted, power is, among other things, the ability to enforce one's moral claims. The powerful can thus conventionalize their moral defaults. David Lockwood, while recognizing power as a latent force, viewed that power must only refer to the capacity to realize one's ends in conflict situations against the will of others, and it must also include the capacity to prevent opposition arising in the first place. Robert Dahl observed that power is the ability to make and implement decisions, and the powerful are those whose decisions consistently match the outcomes. Thus, the concept of power is complex one. Various facets of power are manifested in the given socio-cultural setups which may be formal or informal, modern or traditional, and macro or micro. 3.3 Power structure. Middle. The concept of structure occupies prominent place in biological, anthropological and sociological literatures. In biology, structure is perceived as a set of interrelated organs. For example, human body is an organic structure. The biological conception has prevailed in most of the anthropological and sociological works also. In sociology, the term structure has usually been perceived as a relatively stable social relationship or pattern of interactions. As such, if any social relationship or interaction involves power, then it is power relationship or power interaction. A power relationship is based on the way power is distributed between two individuals or groups relating/interacting with each other. In this sense, power structure simply means a stable pattern of relationships with regard to power, whatever form these relationships take, whether they are tightly or loosely arranged. Sometimes, we come across some confusion surrounding the concept of power structure. For instance, sociologists and political scientists differ in the perception of the concept. The contention stems from the different elements with which each discipline is concerned in the study of power structure.
3.4 Rural power structure. As we know, rural society consists of characteristically distinct relationships, institutions, and groups as compared with urban society. In rural society, we find a distinct pattern of power distribution among individuals and groups, and distinct elements constitute its power structure. Thus, when power structure is located in rural society, we talk about rural power structure. In nutshell, rural power structure refers to a pattern of the relationships of individuals and groups based on power in rural setting. 3.5 Rural power structure in India. The concept of power structure occupies central place in the analysis of Indian rural society. The rural society in India has gone under significant changes in the post-independence period. The attainment of independence is a watermark to be used to initiate a thorough discussion on rural power structure in India. Therefore, to appreciate rural power structure in India properly, it is divided into two parts, namely, traditional power structure in rural India and emergent power structure in rural India. 3.6 Traditional power structure in rural India. Before the independence, there was a feudal political system prevailed in India. It consisted of hundreds of the British-ruled areas and princely states and chieftaincies, which were replicated by the zamindari and jagirdari systems in the rural areas. The feudal system was basically a system of rights and privileges embedded in landed property. It reflected through institutions, values, religion, culture and ideology in the society. Therefore, rural power structure was, then, greatly influenced by the zamindari and jagirdari systems. Primarily it represented economic interests of the zamindars or the jagirdars. It manifested through the institutions of caste and panchayat. Agriculture being the primary occupation, ownership of land and monopoly on economic activities influenced and controlled rural power structure. Thus, in the selection of rural leaders and functioning of the village panchayats and caste panchayats, the zamindars had a virtual monopoly. Along with the zamindari system, caste system has also been a fundamental element of rural social structure. Even the village panchayats were constituted mostly by representatives of caste panchayats. Both the systems gave rise to a unique power structure in rural India. Thus, in pre-independence India, the zamindari and jagirdari systems, caste panchayats and the village panchayats monopolized the rural power structure. Besides, in India there have been living different religious and tribal communities also, and these communities did not have the notion of caste. In case of such communities there were community panchayats and they participated in village panchayats. But in case of the tribal communities which were more or less isolated and remained out of the zamindari and jagirdari systems, there were village panchayats formed of their own fellows. Literacy was very low or totally missing. Modern democracy was alien to the masses in the rural setting. Thus, the landed, illiterate elderly of upper castes of various communities assumed power in the traditional rural India. 3.7 Changes in the traditional rural power structure. Changes in the traditional rural power structure were first initiated during the British regime. The caste and village panchayats were very effective in various parts of the country in the beginning. In the early times it established a highly centralized administration in the country, introduced the zamindari system of separate property rights along with administrative and judicial functions, and gave autonomy to the government's nominees such as headman, patwari and limbadar. These changes set in motion the real decay of traditional village panchayats. Nonetheless, a need was constantly felt for statutory revival of rural local government as a link between the British administration and the villagers. On the 18th of May 1882, Lord Ripon, the then Viceroy of India, declared to set up local self-government bodies as an instrument of political education as well as an outlet for the people's ambitions and aspirations engendered by Western ideas. Remarkably, Ripon proposed a network of rural local bodies which formed a two-tier system of boards at district or sub-district and subdivision or tahsil levels. The district boards, composed of officials and elected members, could invoke only a lukewarm response from Indians in the village panchayat bodies. The Royal Commission in 1909 deplored the disappearance of village autonomy in the zamindari system under the British as against the Ratwari. It suggested a separate department of panchayats as well as the village panchayats consisting of 5 elected members, each, with the headman as ex officio chairman and endowed with civil and criminal jurisdiction in petty cases and responsibility for minor developmental works under control of the district authorities.
Under the Government of India Act 1919, the provincial governments passed several acts to render local self-government fully a representative character. Following the period of the historic non-cooperation movement which encouraged the dispute settlement through informal panchayats and boycott of the government courts, there sprang up numerous panchayats in various parts of the country. The Government of India Act 1935 provided the provinces an opportunity for furtherance of their democratization, financial powers and developmental functions. But the village panchayats still worked as small darbars and petty courts of the British regime. The opportunity for local government appeared short-lived in the wake of intensification of freedom struggle, emergence of important national and international questions, resignation of the popular provincial governments at the outbreak of the World War XI, and assuming of administrative responsibility by the governors. The indifference to these bodies continued up to 1946 when, after a great debate in the Constituent Assembly over the draft constitution, the panchayats were included in the directive principles of state policy for decentralization of power and establishment of panchayats at all levels of rural self-government. A need for review of the structure of panchayats continuing in different states of independent India was felt while implementing the Community Development Program in the early 1950s. Therefore, Balwant Rai Mehta Committee was constituted to study a proposal for setting up viable units of rural self-government. The committee recommended a 3-tier system, Panchayati Raj, which was enacted into act by various states under the Parliament's authorization. However, the traditional panchayats were allowed to continue in the tribal majority states and districts in Northeast India. In 1992, the Mehta model of Panchayati Raj finally attained constitutional status through the Constitution, 73rd Amendment Act enacted by the Indian Parliament. Significantly, in the 1950s the government abolished the zamindari and jagirdari systems and introduced land reforms by enacting laws. Public land such as village ponds, grazing grounds, village streets etc., which were used by the zamindars as personal property, have been declared as community property. The abolition of zamindari system disarmed the zamindars of economic exploitation and political dominance over the villagers, and it paved the way for a more democratic system. Thus, in the changed circumstances under the abolition of the zamindari system, the rural power structure has undergone a transformation. 3.8 Factors responsible for changes in the traditional power structure. Various factors have contributed to bring about change in the traditional power structure. The contribution of the factors varies in terms of its magnitude at different stages of the change and in different regions of rural India. These factors are being mentioned below. 1. The extension of British administration adversely hit the existing traditional village panchayats as it gave autonomy to the government officials. 2. The British effort to set up rural local government, though in a limited way, helped evoke consciousness among the rural people. 3. Mahatma Gandhi's insistence for autonomy of village panchayats in the independent India added importance to local self-government in the rural society. 4. Inclusion of panchayats under the directive principles of state policy in the Indian Constitution for decentralization of power paved the way for people's participation in the power structure. 5. Abolition of the zamindari and jagirdari systems and land reforms in the post-independence period changed the socio-economic context of the power structure. 6. Statutory panchayats were made the instrument of change and development in rural India in the Community Development Program. 7. Party politics and general elections at national and state levels have provided significant political education to the rural people. 8. Green Revolution gave rise to middle castes classes in the power structure. 9. Various legislations related to law and order in the country have instilled new confidence in the poor people as well as provided them opportunity to organize against their exploitation. 10. Constitution, 73rd Amendment ensured the representation of weaker sections such as the SCs, STs, OBCs and women, and their presence at every level of rural self-government has rendered more democratic character to the power structure. Check your progress. 1. Note, I. Write your answer in the space provided below. 2. Check your answer by reacting the text once again. 1. What do you mean by power? 2. Identify the factors responsible for changing traditional power structure. You are listening to this audiobook on Audio Learn IGNOU.
3.9 Democratization point of the traditional power structure. The concept of Panchayati Raj derives itself from Gandhiji's vision of future India of self-reliant villages. Lieutenant assumes political and economic decentralization of powers on the principle, the greater is the power of the panchayat, the better for the people. The Constituent Assembly, while framing Indian Constitution, was concerned more with a centralized government for stability, unity and economic progress of the nation. Therefore, it failed to accept Gandhiji's proposal of autonomous panchayats in independent India. But it was his insistence that the panchayats could find a place in the directive principles of state policy under Part 4 of the Constitution. Though non-judiciable, the Part 4 lays down fundamental and binding reference points for the state in the matter of legislation. Its Article 40 lays down that the state shall take steps to organize village panchayats and endow them with such powers and authority as may be necessary to enable them to function as units of self-government. Originally, the Panchayat Raj was conceived as a means for the Community Development Program, CDP, which itself acceded into the recommendations of the Gromo Food Enquiry Committee. The committee recommended that food production should form the part of a wider plan for all-round village development, and that the administrative machinery of government should be organized and equipped for efficient discharge of its duties for India as a welfare state. The CDP started on 2nd October 1952 in 55 community development projects, each covering 3 development blocks of 300 villages with a population of about 3 lakhs. It aimed at 4 objectives: I. Transformation of the people's outlook; 2. Inculcation of the spirit of self-reliance; 3. Generation of the habit of cooperative action through popular bodies; and 4. These 3 objectives leading to new enlightenment, strength and cooperation. In view of the people's demand for increase in the number of blocks, as well as the stress of the Grow More Food Enquiry Committee on improving the people's socio-economic conditions to succeed in agricultural development, the Government of India introduced National Extension Service (NES) on 2nd October 1953, as immediate extension of the CDP was not possible. Originally, CDP aimed to mark an intensive phase of rural development lasting for 3 years, and NES was a permanent multifunctional extension agency in a block. CDP was the method, and NES was the agency to cover the entire country within next 10 years or till 1963. During the first 5-year plan, 1951 to 56, various development activities such as animal husbandry, construction of roads and buildings, health programs, etc., were launched by dividing the country into development blocks, each under a block development officer, assisted by a team of extension officers, Gram Sevaks and Gram Sevikas. The people's participation was sought through the village panchayats with a view to limit the role of government to advice and financial assistance. Expert committees were constituted at the block and district levels. However, after the initial momentum of 3 to 4 years, the people's participation declined, and CDP grew more as government program. The reasons were: I. Lack of consciousness among the rural masses; 2. Too much emphasis on Shramdan, free labor; 3. Lack of financial resources; 4. Wrong approach in the training process; absence of proper local leadership; 6. Neglect by political parties; and 7. Lack of proper propaganda. Therefore, Planning Commission urged National Development Council (NDC) for investigation of the whole issue of rural development by a team of experts. Early in 1956, NDC appointed a study team headed by the rural specialist Balwantaraya G. Mehta to identify the problems emergent in the rural community development work, and also to assist the proposal to set up viable units of local self-governance in the rural areas, thus initiating democratic decentralization of authority in favor of villages and groupings of villages. In 1957, the team recommended a 3-tier system of rural local self-government, indirect elections, and a genuine transfer of power to the bodies for planning and implementing developmental activities at the levels of village, block and district. The middle tier, i.e., block level body, was conceived as the main agency for rural development with vast administrative and financial powers, whereas the district body was given the advisory cum supervisory role. After NDC's approval of the report in January 1958, the Parliament enacted the Act, and the states also passed acts to suit special needs of their respective regions. In August 1958, This scheme was implemented in some areas of Andhra Pradesh on experimental basis, but Rajasthan was the foremost to introduce it on 2nd October 1959.
While implementing it, majority of the states and union territories followed three-tier system and the remaining adopted either two-tier or one-tier, Jammu and Kashmir, or traditional panchayats, Nagaland and Meghalaya, Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Karnataka, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Punjab, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, Arunachal Pradesh and Chandigarh adopted the three-tier system, out of which three models of Panchayati Raj emerged in the country, namely I. The Rajasthan model with the central role of Panchayat Samiti at the block level. 2. The Maharashtra model with the central role of Zilla Parishad at the district level. And 3. The Gujarat model in between the Rajasthan and the Maharashtra model. There has been a gradual shift away from the community or area development to a sectorial or professional approach. In 1960 the government initiated intensive area development program following its disappointment with the CDP's performance in raising agricultural production. In the same year a group headed by Jaya Prakash Narayan was appointed to study how far and in what manner the CDP and the three-tier panchayat system could promote economic development and welfare of the weaker sections in the village communities. The group recommended proper delegation of powers to the Panchayati Raj institutions. Thus, the Panchayati Raj has passed through 4 phases, in all, namely, initial ascendancy, growth and consolidation, phase of decline and phase of resuscitation. The initial phase was concerned with the establishment of NIS, agency, for bringing technical services to the villages by CDP, method, for rural reconstruction during the first 5-year plan and extended over the bulk of the country during the second plan. The growth and consolidation of the Panchayati Raj institutions took place during the third 5-year plan with an emphasis for realization of developmental potential in various sectors. Legislations defining relations of the Panchayati Raj institutions with the state, coming up in most of the underscore states, laid down for the administration of CDP through the Panchayat body at intermediary or block level. The zenith of the institutions was seen in the middle of 1960s when CDP along with representation of the weaker sections covered the entire country. The mounting food shortage and crop failure in 1966-67 forced the point 1. reshuffling of priorities in CDP itself, resulting in an overriding emphasis on agricultural production. The Ministry of Community Development was reduced to a point department in 1966-67 and appended to the Ministry of Food and Agriculture. The Community Development Department intensified the efforts to gain support at the grassroots level. By the arrival of 1970s, the zeal for the PR institutions and CDP was on decline. In 1977, the Ashok Mehta Committee opined that the PR was meant for decentralization of power and increasing people's participation as well as for supporting rural development and strengthening planning process at the micro level. It recommended a two-tier system of Zilla Parishad and Gram Panchayat, along with the Mandal Panchayats of a population of 15,000 to 20,000 as the intermediary linkage between the two. Gram Panchayat was the focal point of decentralization of power. In 1980, R.K. Hegde, the then Chief Minister of Karnataka, implemented the recommendations and introduced a real district government with liberal transfer of powers and resources and effective role of the elected PR office bearers at the local level. Planning. Andhra Pradesh government headed by N.T. Rama Rao also moved in this direction. During 1980s, the village panchayats were used for implementation of land reforms and distributive justice under Tivaga movement in West Bengal. In Maharashtra and Gujarat, the PR system has been functioning in a comparatively better manner. In all these states, the PR institutions have provided the weaker sections and intermediary castes the opportunity to rise up on the political ladder. In 1989, the then Prime Minister, Rajiv Gandhi, attempted to strengthen the PR institutions by bringing the Constitution, 64th Amendment, Act, which could not be passed in Rajya Sabha, but with the passing of the Constitution, 73rd Amendment Act in 1992, inserted as the Part 9 of the Constitution, the PR system has attained a constitutional status. The Act makes provisions for regular elections conducted by the State Election Commission of the respective state and ensures representation of weaker sections such as scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, other backward classes and women through reservations of seats in various bodies. Various states have enacted acts accordingly with variations suitable to their situations.
Before the Constitution, 73rd Amendment Act, 1992, the Panchayati Raj system was not very effective. It had limited powers and had to face various structural constraints, limitations and weaknesses. To strengthen it, the Act of 1992, which came into force from 24 April 1993, has enabled the panchayats to play a very important role in development. This Act has identified the areas of jurisdiction of the panchayats, which have been mentioned in the 11th schedule of the Constitution. These are given below. 1. Agriculture, including agricultural extension. 2. Land improvement, implementation of land reforms, land consolidation and soil conservation. 3. Minor irrigation, water management and watershed development. 4. Animal husbandry, dairying and poultry. 5. Fisheries. 6. Social forestry and farm forestry. 7. Minor forest produce. 8. Small-scale industries, including food processing industries. 9. KHD, village and cottage industries. 10. Rural housing less than 11. Drinking water. 12. Fuel and fodder. 13. Road, culverts, bridges, ferries, waterways and other means of communication. 14. Rural electrification, including distribution of electricity. 15. Non-conventional energy sources. 16. Poverty alleviation programs. 17. Education, including primary and secondary schools. 1S. Technical training and vocational education. 19. Adult and non-formal education. 20. Libraries. 21. Cultural activities. 2. Market and fairs. 23. Health and sanitation, including hospitals, primary health centers and dispensaries. 24. Family welfare. 25. Women and child development. 26. Social welfare, including welfare of the handicapped and mentally retarded. 27. Welfare of the weaker sections, and in particular of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. 28. Public distribution systems. 29. Maintenance of communication assets. As the objective of the Panchayati Raj institutions was to ensure active and meaningful people's participation in the programs of rural development which were a part of the Community Development Program and National Extension Services, they were expected to accelerate the arrested process of change and development and to enable the rural people, including the deprived sections, to participate and contribute in the national rural reconstruction and development. They were also assigned the task of redistribution of land among the poor with a view to transform the agrarian structure. However, these measures were not able to bring about desired results till the 1990s. In concrete terms, the political response with regard to major structural changes has not been satisfactory, and indifference has prevailed among political workers at the grassroots. Power capture at national and state levels has been the main objective of political parties. Political parties generally ignore their manifestos once the elections are over. There is also a policy gap in the party politics at the national, state and local levels. Ignorance, poverty, illiteracy and an egalitarian system have favored the political intentions of the parties which easily sway the ignorant voters on desired political lines. Check your progress too. Note: I. Write your answer in the space provided below. 2. Check your answer by reading the text once again. 1. Point out major objectives of Community Development Program. 2. What are important features of the Constitution's 73rd Amendment Act, 1992? You are listening to this audiobook on Audio Learn IGNOU. 3.10 Emergent P.Q. Structure in Rural India. Social scientists have used two models, viz., dominant caste model and rich peasants model, to analyze the dynamics of rural power structure in the post-independence India. These models are discussed below. 3.10.1 Dominant caste model. M. Srinivas has given the concept of dominant caste. He felt that the use of this concept is essential to analyze hierarchy of a multi-caste village, to settle disputes at the level of village or caste. It is also important in the study of pattern of Sanskritization among the several castes of an area and the locally dominant caste and the kind of dominance it enjoys. Occasionally caste is dominant in a group of neighboring villages, if not over a district or two, and in such cases local dominance is linked with regional dominance. Such linkage also exists when the caste which is locally dominant is different from the caste which is regionally dominant. Power of dominant caste emanates from various sources. Srinivas is of the opinion that a dominant caste preponderates numerically over the other castes, and it also wields preponderant economic and political power. A large and powerful caste group can be more easily dominant if its population in the local caste hierarchy is not too low. Besides these, he also added Western education and modern occupations as the sources of dominance. He also used the term decisive dominance, which means that if a caste enjoys dominance in all the above elements, it becomes decisively dominant. But this kind of dominance is not common. The power attributes are dispersed among the castes in the villages. Therefore, a caste may be ritually high but economically and numerically inferior. Similarly, a populous caste may be economically poor and ritually low. This model implies that there exists a status summation. That is, high status in one aspect of life helps acquire the same status in other aspects as well. A caste with numerical majority of members in a village population and possessing most of the land in the village can use the coercive power that the land and the members' strength confer to succeed in efforts to get elected to official positions in official panchayats and its C1 aims ritual status. Thus, attributes, symbolic, ritual, and material, land and office, are the crucial sources of power. When examined in the context of various experiences from the countryside, the model has offered several variants and modifications. In many cases, it is only a segment of the dominant caste that actually makes major decisions in villages or is benefited from them. S.C. Dubey observed that a caste is dominant when power is diffused in the group and is expressed in the interest of the whole group or at least a sizable part of it. Pronounced inequalities of wealth, prestige, and power, found among the members of a so-called dominant caste, create the dominant individuals of such caste who exploit non-dominant members of their own caste as well as the members of non-dominant castes. Similarly, T.K. Umman felt that Srinivas failed to observe alternative situations, such as a numerically weak caste owning most of the land and wealth in a village, or a numerically strong caste which is economically deprived and ritually depressed, or a ritually superior caste which is numerically weak, and so on. It seems fairly obvious that in such situations a number of castes will share the community power. According to him, there are multiple power structures in a multi-caste village or region having different layers and levels of leadership. He has also given two other useful concepts, namely, power pool and power dispersion. According to K.L. Sharma, in certain areas families and individuals dominate, whereas in other domains, near monopoly of power or dispersion of power is found. Both caste and individuals are found to dominant, but the areas and aspects of dominance of the two differ to a large extent. The rural power elites are not a homogeneous social group. They are only an aggregation of differentiated dominant individuals, as they are not characterized by unity, commonality of interests, equality of status and economic position, and so on. According to this model, the nature of dominance or power structure in rural India is as follows. 1. There are dominant castes, dominant caste segments and dominant individuals in the village communities. 2. There exist multiple power structures in a multi-caste village or region. 3. There is power pool and power dispersion in the village communities. 4. Elites are a heterogeneous lot, usually from the dominant caste or castes, and therefore, they participate in the community power structure differently.
Thus, by the extent of dominance, the dominant caste model admits the possibility that many castes, or their caste segments or individuals or other groups have access to power resources, and therefore they share some of the power in a village or group of villages. Moreover, dominance is normally exerted through influence rather than power. The tolerable amount of social mobility that occurs in the caste hierarchy aids the recruitment of suitable individuals and groups for the emergent economic and social roles created by industrialization. But in any event, inequality of power is viewed as the general stability of the rural society. 3.10.2 The rich peasant model. According to this model, the power structure in contemporary rural India is based on the control of economic and political resources. Since independence, command of the economic surplus and formal and informal political institutions in the villages increasingly passed on to rich peasants. Through this control, rich peasants have been able to corner the lion's share of the government's development resources at the cost of low-status groups, and also to exert major power in state and local governments. As a result, the rich peasants have been able to protect their control of intra-village economic and political process. This type of development is the consequence of dependence on the so-called progressive farmers as agents of Community Development Project for Change and Development in Indian Villages. Wertheim has mentioned the following 8 preconditions for a peasant to become a progressive farmer. 1. Household possesses at least 2 acres of land for irrigation and 8 acres of land for dry farming, and if irrigation is not possible in any area, he should have 16 acres of land for dry farming. 2. He should have at least 1 pair of good bullocks. 3. He should have at least 1 cow, preferably of good Gir breed or of local breed, or he should arrange to have it at the earliest, in case he has none. 4. He should have planted at least 5 trees on his farm, or should have given an assurance of doing so at the earliest. 5. He should have dug at least 2 systematic compost pits either on his wadi or field, or he should give an assurance of doing so at the earliest. 6. He should have taken all possible measures to prevent erosion of his land. 7. He should have adopted improved agricultural practice by taking advantage of agricultural research. 8. He must be a member of any one of the cooperative societies, or should enroll himself as such within a year of his having been registered a progressive farmer. These progressive farmers were accorded preferential treatment in services provided by the government, and they were given improved agricultural practices. It was assumed that by such a scheme the agriculturists would have greater faith and confidence in the results obtained in fields of their were now cultivators, which they would readily adopt. A smaller group of individuals was expected to function as local agents of change. The persons occupying existing positions of leadership in the village as well as traditional leaders were used. The underlying assumption in this approach was that if leaders could first be converted to the ideology of change, the task of converting the rest of the community would be greatly facilitated. Implied in this assumption was the belief that people normally looked to this group for guidance and would automatically start emulating their example once they adopted the new practices. AWS also hoped that by making them a link between the officials and the people, some of the difficulties in communication would be appreciably reduced. But these people not only failed to attract people towards development but also they manipulated the available resources and the benefits from the government in their own favor. The rich peasants, besides a section from the descendants of the traditional feudal lords, are mostly the creation of Zamindari abolition, land reforms, democratization and Green Revolution. They own land as a rule. They perform some manual work in major farm operations whereas generally they hire labor. According to D. Gray, landlords and rich landowners, including non-cultivating urban moneylenders, owners belong to the upper castes such as Brahmin, Thakur, or Baniyar in northern India. In Andhra the Kammas, Reddis, and Raos, in Mysore the Vokkaligars and Lingayats, the Patidars in the Gujarat region while the Kunbi, Marathas and Deshmukhs in Maharashtra could be cited as some examples of the locally dominant landholding castes. At the village level these landowning classes often formed only a small nucleus. Thus, according to both the models a single power resource is not sufficient. A group with power in a village must control some supra-village power resource. Control of various power resources put a minority ahead of others in a village population in possession of at least most resources. In the rich peasant model this minority controls most of the land, credit, agricultural inputs and products whereas in the dominant caste model it controls most of the economic resources, prestige and government positions. Now, we can present the features of the emergent power structure. 3.10.3 Features of the emergent power structure. 1. Either directly or indirectly the upper castes have a dominant role in rural power structure. 2. Power has shifted from crude caste structure and has come to be located in more differentiated structures such as panchayats and political parties. The important role of caste, however, remains. 3. Due to the process of democratization the lower castes have become more organized, and their empowerment to exert control over rural power structure is clearly visible. 4. Rural leadership of limited caste groups is being replaced by other caste groups. Caste remains an inseparable part of rural power structure. 5. Quite often informal leaders influence the decisions at the village level. The most important feature of this kind of leadership is that they are men who can get things done, despite the contrary wishes of other less powerful people. 3.11 Summary. The traditional power structure consisted of the zamindari system, the village panchayats, and the caste panchayats, which has undergone democratization in the post-independence period. As a result, multiple power structures of castes, classes, segments, and elites have emerged. However, many of the traditional attributes are continuing in the changed context as well. 3.12 Keywords. Dominance, a type of action in which an actor, individual or group, is consistently in a position to obtain compliance with its commands. Democratization, the process of introducing democratic institutions at one or more levels of governance in a society. Panchayati Raj, the set of democratic institutions of rural local self-government at village, block and district levels. Decentralization of power. The process of distribution of power into different levels of governance, for example, Panchayati Raj. Thank you, we will see you in the next video.